Hey, I'm Jewelz. I saw something and I have a perspective. This is A Queer's Perspective. I recently watched Coming Out Colton, and we're going to get into it. Colton spent some time on a reality dating show, The Bachelorette. He was also the lead of The Bachelor. He is a former NFL player, and he got Netflix to follow him around and document as he tells everybody he's gay. That was the wrong sound. Love to see it. Love when folks are gay. Love when people can live in their truth. However, Colton's last relationship with a female ended with him getting a restraining order on him because he put a tracking device on her car and stalked her. We don't love to see that. We hate that. And so some people aren't really here for this documentary, and I totally understand that. He does address the Cassie situation multiple times. He expresses remorse. Does he actually sound and come off as remorseful? I don't know. I've broken this down into 3 parts. Let's get into it. First one, category is loved ones. Colton comes out to his mom, his dad, his childhood best friend, his brother, and also his high school football coach. And that's where we're going to start. So Colton expresses to his coach, hey, when I was in school, the locker room environment was not really healthy, and homophobia, and, I just didn't know what to do, and I didn't feel like, I could come out. At one point, he even says to him, knowing what you know, would you have come out? And his coach says, the safest thing is not. If you're an athlete, it's a tough world. Yes, the world is tough. This is true, but this is also not an appropriate response. He then goes on to say about his current players in 2021, I just don't see one of our guys having the guts to come out and say, Coach, I'm gay. They would worry, what's my coach gonna think? He goes on to say, that's a tough situation because of how society is. I just think this is a really terrible response. I think these are true statements. Yes, society has made it hard. However, we are active members of society. And as a coach, you can say, hey, here's what doesn't happen in our locker room. You set the tone, and he completely punted that responsibility. I'm a former teacher and former college coach, and if a player ever came to me and said, hey, the environment that you created, I felt unsafe in, I would profusely apologize and vow to do better and make sure I was doing better. I would check in with my players immediately. That's not the vibe I got from that coach, that he was going to do any check-ins or that he felt any responsibility to make sure that his players did feel like they could come out or to create an environment where they can. It made me really mad, honestly, to watch a coach just kind of say, yeah, it's tough out there. It's tough out there because we make it tough for men to come out, particularly men in sports to come out, because of the homophobia and the idea of what a man is supposed to look like. Colton, at some point, explicitly expresses the homophobia in the locker room and the complicitness that the staff and the teachers, he explains that the teachers would make jokes or kind of look the other way. Like he expresses this to the coach, and the coach gives a really piss poor apology in which he says, if I did anything that ever hurt you, I'm sorry about that. He just said you did, so why do you mean if? Like, you know what you've done. Was not thrilled with that response. I want to touch on Colton's father's response. Ultimately, he gives a very loving response, but his initial reaction is to ask Colton, what do you want me to say in this moment? He kind of freezes a little bit. And so I just kind of wanted to pause there and say, I know what a gay kid wants to hear. Firstly, we do want to hear what's on your heart. We want to hear whatever you truly think about what was just expressed. But we hope what's on your heart is I love you. I hope you say, thank you for telling me. I love you no less, perhaps even more, because now I know you more. I know you more deeply. Are you okay? Do you want a hug? These are all appropriate things to say. And then, whatever other things. I do hold back from saying, this changes nothing, because perhaps it changes a lot. Perhaps you've said some really hateful things in the past, and you'll stop saying those things or thinking those things. But Colton's dad said nice things, gave him a hug. It just seemed to take longer than hell I would want. Colton's brother does a lovely sibling reaction to him coming out, his childhood best friend, who clearly wishes that she got the opportunity to marry him, has an appropriate response, cries again because she's dying inside. Colton has a dear friend in Gus Kentworthy who we love and we stand and we're here for. Gus introduces him to friends in Nashville. They take him partying. He doesn't like to party. He's not the partying type. So then he takes him to a couple who have a kid and he loves that. That's the life he wants, blah, blah, blah. His mother has a fine reaction. Seems like she doesn't really want to talk on camera. And they do this very odd, this kind of handhold. It's very strange. And then we come to the reaction of his 3 church bro friends. They kind of freeze. And, there's no hug, there's no I love you, there's no thank you, that's not true. They do say I love you. They also say everybody sins and, we don't see eye to eye on this. He pushes back on that, which is good. But ultimately, one of them says, I'd be curious to see what the pastor thinks and take it from there, which is mind-blowing to me that a 30-year-old can't process how they feel or come to a conclusion of how they should treat their friend who has just shared a big part of who they are. Moving on, category is the church. Colton talks to 2 sets of clergy people. He talks to a more conservative pastor over the phone. That conversation lasts a little less than 5 minutes, and he talks to a group of conservative clergy people. That one lasts around 7 minutes. Okay, so I'm attempting to be as fair as possible, but I have biases, of course. The phone call had some production going on. I don't know. It just felt like the music came in at inopportune times. There was like some gargling that kind of happened. It just seemed more difficult to hear, and I don't know if that was like a choice of like what the conservative pastor was saying was difficult to hear. I'm not really sure, but there was definitely something going on. At times it seemed like he had a random roommate all of a sudden, and there was like a vacuum cleaner. I was like, where is this coming from? Anyway, I had the captions on and could hear everything, and boy, did Pastor No Name say some things. The main issue that I have with conservative phone pastor was that he outlined that the Bible makes it really clear that there's 3 things that are big issues, that as long as you don't do these 3 things, you're good. Those 3 things are abortion, divorce, and homosexuality. I am not a biblical scholar, but I also don't believe that to be biblically accurate. For one, abortion actually isn't mentioned in the Bible. Anything that you're saying about abortion is an interpretation based on how you're perceiving the value of life being, not abortion. Nor does the Bible ever say as long as you don't do these 3 things, you're good to go. That's just not what the Bible says. Shocker, I was not a fan of the conservative phone pastor. He then goes and speaks with 8 clergy members, and they are LGBT affirming, and it's just a lot more loving. They break down Romans 6, which says that the wages of sin is death. Fun stuff. one of the clergy members also discusses Jesus' last words, which are, "It is finished." He explains that this is better interpreted to say, "It is paid in full." And so if you take Romans 6, the wages of sin is death, coupled with "it is finished, it is paid in full," by his interpretation of the Bible, we good. So this pastor believes that we have overcome sin because of Jesus dying on the cross. Instead of living for redemption, we're supposed to be living because we are redeemed. Let me say that to the church again. Instead of living for redemption, we're living because we are redeemed. Truly, it's a good message. I mean, the phone pastor said, and I quote, "Homosexuality is really, really bad." So I guess if that's what you believe, then okay. But I'd rather believe the redemption, it is paid in full. That sounded great. If you want to, if that's your jam, I think that's a better message. Seeing the two different approaches to scripture is interesting. And therein lies the problem with the Bible, is that it's all about interpretation. So it's however you want to interpret that. Moving on, category is narrative. Colton does explain that he attempted suicide. And I personally am really sorry that he felt that was an option for him, and hope that never, his life never gets to that point. He provides resources after each episode about, hey, here are some resources if, just like a black screen with phone number in regards to suicide prevention. I think that's really great. Him and Gus discuss at some point during the documentary how to come out publicly, do an interview, do an IG post, all of these are him controlling the narrative still. This whole 6-part documentary is still Colton Underwood controlling the narrative, as he is a producer on this 6-part Netflix documentary. So if this does well, he does well, right? Colton sits down with 3 former NFL players, Dave Kopax, Ezra Twolo, and Sam Smith, and they talk about their experience playing football and being gay and what that's like. And I think that was an incredible conversation and really, really important one to have. He also sits down with a transgender pastor, and she reads him to filth. No, not really to filth, but she really dropped some bombs on him, and it was a really, really great conversation. She says to him, "You apologize to make yourself feel sorry. It takes looking in the mirror and saying, 'I was a piece of shit.'" Colton at one point asks her, how do you move on? He's, feeling bad about, what he did to Cassie. And she says to him, "It might just burn in your soul forever." I think when we wrong people, when we do terrible, terrible things to other people, as he did to Cassie, we want to be forgiven. And the reality is you may not be forgiven. You can forgive yourself, but then that person that you wronged, you may do irreparable damage. And so your kindness and your love needs to go to other people. And it may weigh with you forever. That's the reality. She goes on to tell him, "You must own everything you've said and did and try and figure out how to be a better person each day." I think it was really sound advice. But my absolute favorite piece of chef's kiss gem that she told him, Colton asked, "How do you forgive yourself?" And she said, "Therapy." Come on. She followed up and said, "And for me, a lot of prayer." I am psyched about that answer because it is my belief that people of the cloth are not going to say therapy, they're going to say prayer first. And so the truth of therapy is how I got through that, is how I forgive myself, is really honest, and I'm so appreciative of that. and prayer if prayer works for you. So I have to ask, is this good for the gays? Representation is important. This is another gay person telling their story and being visible on television. I think the conversation between the football players, Michael Sam, Ezra Tola, David Kopax, it is important for people to know that gay men are physically strong and play team sports. And so that's really important, and that is a definite pro to this documentary. The church conversation was incredibly important. It was great to see LGBT clergy people. It was great to hear, loving messages from the church, which queer people do not always hear. And so that was really, really positive from this documentary. The cons of this documentary, it felt rushed. And I mean that in a couple different ways. I couldn't get a sense of time. This seemed like he went through all of these things in about a month and a half, maybe. I really don't have a sense of time, but it just felt rushed. He's 29 years old. He should know himself enough to know that, I'm not the partying type. I think he knew that, but still wanted to show that part of gay culture, which is just culture in general. Straight people go out and have fun and hook up, just like gay people do. And so I don't think that's unique. Hooking up is not unique to gay culture. So I think he could have just said, actually, I don't want to party. Show me family. I think he could have put his foot down a little bit more. They go to a porn store. I don't know. That felt really unnecessary when he knew what he wanted, which was a relationship and not hooking up. I also think unpacking how do you fit in as a gay Christian, that takes a long time. That takes a process. That takes visiting multiple churches, finding your church friends and your church family. This felt really rushed. Because his faith is so important to him, he should take his time. He doesn't have to speed through that. It all felt kind of rushed. The second thing is just the timing in general of this documentary. I don't think that there was enough time in between the restraining order that he rightfully got from Cassie and him coming out. I just think he could have honestly done all of this off screen and then come back and been hey, a year, 2 years later, here's where I've been. Now, he got famous because of a reality show, and the nature of reality shows is that you got to stay relevant. And so that's kind of what this feels like, his attempt to stay relevant, get his coin while he's still has some earning potential. So all that being said, is this good for the gays? I'm going to say no. I'm going to say we didn't need this. It could have been an IG post. It could have been a YouTube video. It could have been in 2022, 2023. No, I don't think this was good for the gays. This has been A Queer's Perspective. We're living because we are redeemed. Instead of trying to live for redemption, okay, we are living because we are redeemed. That was my best Baptist.